This is Gotham TV Podcast, episode 59, looking at Gotham Season 2, episode 8, Tonight's the Night.
Hey, this is Drew Powell. I play Butch Gilzine on Gotham, and you are listening to Gotham TV Podcast.
Welcome back, Gothamites, to Gotham TV Podcast, where we are looking at this evening's episode of Gotham, Tonight's the Night, which is episode 8 of this second season. I am one of your hosts, John.
And I'm your other host, Derek. We're busy little bees this week. We've been doing lots of podcasting. Unfortunately, not on Gotham. It took us a little bit longer than normal to get back to this episode of Gotham. What we've been doing is covering Deadpool over on our sister podcast, or our brother podcast, Defenders TV podcast. Just got that episode out this week. So with a leap day in the year, this year, we added an extra podcast to our list.
Yeah, we are pretty busy indeed. And as such, we are slightly falling behind, I think. But that is how the cookie crumbles.
That's right.
And we still have an Agent Carter podcast to do this week. So we are going to be even busier moving forward. But with this, we are Gotham TV Podcast. Enough about our sister and brother podcast. And we can be found on gothamtvpodcast.com/iTunes. You can also search Gotham TV Podcast on any other good podcast catcher. Please just search Gotham TV Podcast on Podcast Addict, Player FM, Stitcher, or Beyond Pod. And of course, we are nothing but without you, the listener. So please subscribe and leave a review. You can also join us for any discussions and feedback on the podcast. On Gotham this season, season 2, just send in comments or discussions to feedback at Gotham TV Podcast.
Yeah, and you can also join us over on Facebook. Just search for Gotham TV Podcast. We have a page and a group over there. We recently set up the group over there just for this year so that we can talk about Gotham at the UK pace, because we know that there's a lot of spoilers out there as the second half of Season 2 kicks back in the US and Canada. There'll be a lot of spoilers, people talking about episodes that none of us have seen yet. So if you want to come and join and talk about Gotham at that pace, just search for Gotham TV Podcast over on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. Again, we will ensure that we don't spoil any future episodes. Follow us at Gotham TV Podcast over on Twitter, or join our Google Plus. You could see us over there as well.
Absolutely. But I think with that, we can move on to this week's episode of Gotham, Tonight's the Night.
Yeah.
As always, we will be covering our 5 points of the episode, good, bad, or indifferent, and we will be looking at them to see whether we can spot in the mix a Batman 66, a Tim Burton Batman, or a Christopher Nolan Batman. And of course, with Batman v Superman only 3 weeks away now at this stage, I wonder whether we will be looking out for a Ben Affleck Batman as well, moving forward.
Possibly, yeah. Maybe Bruce will get a metal suit, perhaps.
And fight a young Clark Kent.
You never know. There might be another playground battle coming up for Brucey.
But with that, then, Derek, what are the details of tonight's episode?
Yeah, this episode, Tonight's the Night, was written by another Gotham newcomer this week. Jim Barnes wrote this episode. He has done a few TV shows in the past. He's done Falling Skies, Revolution, and Nikita, but pretty recently joining the group for Gotham, so we'll see what he got. This episode was directed by Jeffrey Hunt, though, so a seasoned professional within Gotham. He directed the wonderful first part of the reveal of Jerome last year. The episode The Blind Fortune Teller, that was his episode. So another bit of quality directing coming into this one. But John, do you want to tell us what they gave us between them with the synopsis for this week's episode?
Absolutely. Theo Gallivan offers Bruce a proposition. Information about the killer of his parents in exchange for a controlling stake in Wayne Enterprises. In the meantime, Theo has also instructed Barbara to kill Jim Gordon, and she confronts him at the GCPD, where Gordon risks himself and his integrity to find more information about Gallivan. However, en route to an unspecified location, the police envoy is attacked and Jim is taken hostage. hostage to Barbara's fantasy for a twisted wedding at Gotham Cathedral. However, Bullock, Barnes, and the Strike Force discovers Gordon's location, and Barbara is given a bigger letdown at the altar than she was expecting. Elsewhere, Galavan's other plans begin to unravel as Bruce declines Theo's proposition, just as Gordon arrives and arrests Galavan following information obtained from Barbara. Meanwhile, if you go down to the Gotham woods today, you are sure of a big surprise, as was Enigma, who has run in to a familiar face.
Yeah, some excellent stuff in there towards the end of this episode, definitely.
Like, overall, a pretty good episode, I think. I think there were some elements that were a bit... I think so. It was a bit inconsistent, this episode, for me, if I'm totally honest. But there were some also really great bits, which, like, it kind of threw me. I didn't quite know what to think of this episode. Some really good bits, but also then a few sort of dud hits for me. But I think that's my kind of overall impression of the episode. Derek, what were yours?
Yeah, I think pretty similar. There's some. It's great to see Barbara back at her full crazy self. Definitely, I loved the moment in the woods, which we'll talk about as we get through our points. But yeah, there was a couple. There's kind of a little bit of a misbalancing, I suppose, in this episode. Kind of made me look forward to next week's episode a lot more than just enjoying this particular episode.
Definitely. I mean, I think it also as well may just have suffered from. Coming off the back of last week's episode, which we obviously both really, really enjoyed. And sometimes that can always be an issue with episodes. But ultimately, that's how you decide whether an episode is good or bad or not, Absolutely. I suppose, ultimately. But I think with that, Derek, what's your first point, your first case file?
My first case note, yes, is... Barbara's crazy as a bag of cats in this episode. That's my exact point. It opens up with a really interesting idea, which is kind of a dream sequence or a nightmare sequence for Barbara Keane, where she's finally tying the knot with a bit of a weird version of Jim Gordon. Loved the scene though. I loved as all the other characters in Gotham started to replace the people in the ceremony. So you had Oswald Cobblepot replacing the priest. You had Galavan replacing the organist up on the stage. Thought that was a really cool touch. And one particular touch which I really enjoyed, which is I think our first Tim Burton Batman call out that we've had this season, when Barbara opens her mouth and releases the flying bird from it. Nice little call out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, that's from that's Selena Kyle did that in Batman Returns. She popped a bird in her mouth and it flew out into the air right in front of the Penguin. So a nice little call out there that obviously Barbara Keane at that stage is standing right in front of the priest who is now Oswald Cobblepot. So a nice little tie there. I liked the touch.
Really, really good. And of course we see a Barbara in the Belfry as well, where bats normally reside, which was really good towards the end. I mean, certainly this was a huge point. It's one of my points as well. Not so much about her being crazy, although as always, I love crazy Babs. But it's just that Jim and Barbara get their wedding day. Not that Jim particularly wants it, but that they have their day in the sun. I really like this. I mean, we've kind of been discussing, and also, other podcasts, the forums, all this kind of stuff have been discussing how Barbara Keane's character is significantly different from the comics, especially given that she would ultimately marry Jim Gordon. We kind of thought this was going to be a happy ever after kind of story. And here, to an extent, we have that wedding that everyone expects to happen. So I think that's quite clever. I really enjoyed that little nod to the comics, the nod to the discussions that have been had on this point, and the fact that it's done in this twisted way, I thought was really, really good. I also like the fact that, Leslie Tompkins is so not impressed, both in terms of the fact that Jim puts himself in danger by sort of going with Barbara to, a location that she doesn't even say anything about. I mean, Harvey and Jim are saying, this is a trap, this is a trap. They know it's a trap. So Leslie is not impressed with how Jim is literally throwing his life around like this and putting it to chance, as well as the fact that he does have a good old kiss with Barbara in the interrogation or the interview room. Yep. So, like, Leslie, I think she says, we need to speak about this later. So this is not done. And I wonder to what extent does this start or maybe mark an end to their relationship, or does it go from strength to strength? Who knows? But I think that it adds a nice little twist into that dynamic of Jim and Leslie, which I really like, with all of these Jim and Barbara scenes in this episode, which I just thought was really, really good. And of course, she is also at the wedding. Yeah. The twisted wedding.
Absolutely. And there is another couple of moments from Barbara where she's saying things to Leslie directly, saying things like, oh, you're always there for me, you love him no matter what, kind of thing. So making Leslie question her decision to fall in love with this man, I suppose, and accept everything that he's done so far. It's kind of Barbara saying to him, well, I did the same thing, and look what's happened to me. Maybe you don't want to go down this path. She's almost giving her a nice, helpful advice, even though she's actually just trying to split the two of them up, And it does seem, as you say, at points in this, that Leslie's kind of taken some of that on board, where she is questioning the decision to snog his ex-girlfriend right in front of her,
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think for this episode, the trailer that Gotham on 5 put out directly after episode 7 was out had Barbara in the wedding dress. I didn't press play because I was going, that's going to be the end of the episode. There's going to be a big cliffhanger that the two of them are about to get married, and the episode will be leading up to it. So I didn't expect this to be the opening of the episode, that there would be the wedding. And then obviously it leads into the big service at the end.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I do think that Barbara raised a few interesting points in her interrogation of Jim at the altar, whilst Leslie is there. Like, it was very Two-Face. It was very much that, he pretends to be this lovely person, but there's a dark side to him as well. Yeah. She's kind of very much saying he is like a Two-Face, except he doesn't flip the coin. Yeah. He actually has this bad side to him that everyone seems to accept, because he then, from time to time, sprinkles it with this I'm a moral, ethical good guy. And I thought that was a really interesting take on Jim Gordon.
Especially after a discussion last week where you were questioning about whether Jim Gordon is the upstanding moral center of this universe, or has he changed significantly? So it's kind of answered that question pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I like the fact that Barbara calls him out for killing someone, for Penguin. I thought Leslie saying, oh yeah, he's told me this as though it's all right. I mean, it's still a bit weird to me. And I think to me this points to one of the inconsistencies, which this is a really, really great scene, and I absolutely loved it. But still, I can't get over, even in a heightened universe, Leslie's acceptance, certainly as a medical examiner, right, of Jim killing someone, not in the line of his work, not whilst he was on duty, but simply to, in order to get back into, the GCPD, to essentially take down someone who is just as bad as, in effect, he is. And I find her immediate acceptance of this, and ultimately then not accepting Barbara's craziness in front of her, as being really kind of problematic.
Interesting.
For some of these scenes, because on the one hand, she's accepting something that is absolutely just as nutty and crazy as what Barbara is doing.
Although she did send him off to do what Oswald had asked him to do. That was kind of her pushing him. So she did know about the killing before it happened. That's exactly what Jim was worried was going to happen when he went off to Oswald, that he was going to be asked to do a job. And Leslie was the one that kind of said, well, you have to get back on the force. Luckily, effectively, Oswald chose his target to be a pretty bad guy. So it's not like Jim was sent out to kill an innocent. This was a bag handler, a guy that had stolen a lot of money. He's a criminal anyway, kind of thing. So, but yes, Jim has now murdered a criminal, which is not something he would have done in the past. But I think because of Leslie being involved in that discussion or involved in that decision, she is willing to accept it. But I like that Barbara puts the question back in her head again. Maybe you weren't supposed to accept something like that.
Well, maybe so, definitely. And yeah, I mean, I know that she kind of is aware that there is a problematic relationship with Jim, but it's even just the fact that, the consequence of that, which is, Commissioner Loeb is despicable, and you want him to be replaced, but actually as time moves on you kind of go, well, actually he was replaced by someone who is increasingly becoming like not as despicable but questionable, just as Commissioner Loeb is. And the whole thing and storyline around that is about morality and ethics, about getting rid of corruption. Absolutely. And yet, actually, it's been done in a corrupt way. So it's really some of these things, and as I say, even in a heightened universe, are beginning to maybe be a bit slightly problematic for me. Okay. Ultimately. But I absolutely love this scene. And as I say, it was more just that to me felt like a slight inconsistency here.
Right.
That, on the one hand, Barbara's actions are questioned all the time by Leslie, so that she's crazy and so on, and yet she's willing to forgive and forget the actions that her boyfriend is doing, which actually are maybe in certain lights just as bad as what Barbara is doing.
Right. Yeah, perhaps. I'm kind of thinking this is kind of setting up that great moment from Batman Year One where Batman and Harvey Dent and Jim Gordon meet up and they kind of say, we're going to be the incorruptible ones. We're going to be the ones that save the city by being incorruptible because everybody else is corruptible. And I'm wondering if this is kind of setting up the pattern that Harvey Dent has already done some kind of shady stuff already in the show. A little bit, supporting Galavan, for example, is pretty shady. You've got Jim doing some shady stuff. And then you've got Bruce, who will eventually rise to be the Dark Knight. And I'm wondering if he will lead them out of this kind of, this pattern of making poor decisions and poor choices by his, by being Batman, by being Bruce Wayne, the incorruptible one. You know what I mean? That they kind of bring the three of them together. And I'm wondering if that's what they're kind of setting the groundwork for years to come. Like, it's something very far in the future, obviously. But we can't have Jim falling down a hole constantly where he eventually becomes a villain. And then why would Bruce trust him in future? Kind of thing. Yeah.
But no,
so to your point.
Exactly. And I think when you think of Batman Year One, I expect Jim Gordon to kill people in
the line of duty,
and in defense of him in the line of duty. I expect that. But for example, in Year One, he is ex-military. He's seen too much death. When Commissioner Loeb and Detective Flass are trying to get Jim taken out in Batman Year One, Jim does not resort to killing them or killing someone to get Commissioner Loeb removed. And even when Flass attacks him, he attacks him back, but it is a violence that is intimidating, but it's not fatal to Flass.
Right.
And what I mean is I don't expect Jim to be a police officer or a police detective that doesn't hurt people or doesn't get hands on, but he makes a point of still being distinct from these people, and I think that has gone, and I'm really hoping that the reason it is like this, the reason why Jim Gordon's character is feeling slightly at odds with what I expected, is because we are so early in the narrative of Jim Gordon, and that maybe by the end of the second season and hopefully into a third season that, he starts to realize that one misstep catches up with him and he has to pay a price. I think at this stage, Jim Gordon has to pay a price for that. And I'm hoping that that's how it goes. So it'll be interesting to see now.
And I wonder if that price is going to be the relationship with Leslie. You may be right. Maybe these questions that Barbara's putting in her head are the things that are going to twist on her, And listeners, if you want to hear more about our thoughts of Batman Year One, I think you can go back to episode 4. I think
something like that.
Somewhere around episode 4 or 5 of this podcast, wasn't it?
Early days of the podcast.
2 years ago.
Absolutely.
I think that's enough on the crazy Babs point and the wedding. John, do you want to give us your second point?
Yeah, Penguin pinches another sandwich from Mr. Nigma in the woods, where there's an awful lot going down in the woods there in Gotham. Yeah, a lot of digging, a lot of imaginary picnicking. A poor hunter who's obviously chasing something ends up being the hunted, which I quite liked in a perverse way.
Yeah.
The hunter becomes the hunted, very horror-esque. And then, of course, we see Ed Nigma follow a trail. I think he says there's an awful lot of foot traffic for such a isolated place.
I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, really good.
So well played by Corey Michael Smith, because he is just kind of channeling the crazy of Riddler now. He is Riddler. You don't see evil Ed this time and good Ed. You see just him channeling this guy who's doing some slightly crazy stuff and then questioning to the universe, why is there so many people walking past when I've walked this far in to get away from everybody, Great.
And we see that, when he tracks it down, the person who's pinched his sandwich, it is the Penguin. Out in a trailer, recovering from the horrors of Galavan's mayoral success and big celebratory party.
Yeah.
I was talking slightly about inconsistencies before. Well, here's something very consistent coming from some of the first few episodes, which is Penguin and his love of sandwiches.
Absolutely.
So, props to the writers and everyone involved for that nice little consistency. Absolutely.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It was just that great moment when you're watching the episode and Ed goes, someone's taken my sandwich. And you go, I know exactly who that character is. That's a little trait that's been brought all the way through. Really, really good touch. That also was one of my points, because I just loved the scene. I think it's a nice little farewell to Christian Kringle, to have her buried and have this little service that he's cooked up where they have their a romantic picnic. But also, it's Gotham crazy as well, because he's having a picnic with a dead woman, and people keep traipsing through the burial of a dead woman. It's so classic Gotham, and we could say that now. It's a season and a half in, and they've already got their own little tropes and their own little touch points that they're using, which is great.
Yeah,
really, really
absolutely, really good. Derek, what's your next point?
The one I have is Barbara dead at the end of the episode? How did she survive the fall from the top of the church onto the trees that broke her fall, apparently? I thought that was going to be the end of Barbara. The moment where she falls out of the church, is reaching up in the air, and you've got Jim shouting after her going, no, the classic moment. And then she's got her neck strapped up and she's being brought into hospital and being told that she's in critical condition. Is this the end of Babs? Are we about to see the death of Barbara Keane?
I think this could go a number of different ways. I think definitely, it could be the death and end of Barbara Keane as we know it in Gotham. It could also be, because the way Leslie Tompkins explained it, it was almost as though, she's just got a slight concussion and a few broken bones, which quite frankly is miraculous given the fall. Because I think there may have been some spiky iron railings down there, which could have also come into play on this. But luckily, it was the softest of bushes that broke her fall. So I think it sounds like she isn't going to die, but that she will recover. So that leads me to maybe wonder whether she will, and she might be put into an asylum again, obviously, and maybe she will be in a wheelchair this time, and maybe we see some kind of nod to
her daughter,
to her daughter and Oracle.
Yeah, possibly, or else they're just trying to set up that no one dies in Gotham the way that they never used to die in the comic books. That people keep coming back over and over again from pretty amazing injuries and deaths. I know we have at least one character returning some point later on this season that everybody suspected was dead, so we'll see that in play. But it was just one of those shocking moments where you go, okay, didn't really expect her to jump out of the window or and not be dead. So I just a little other point. It was a really Barbara-centric episode, this episode. So that was one of my other little points. John, do you want to give us your next one?
I do. It is Bruce and Alfred. Again, one of the soaring highlights of this episode. Absolutely think that Sean Pertwee and David Mazouz, every time they are on screen together, I just can't wait to see what they do. They have embodied Bruce Wayne, young Bruce Wayne, and Alfred Pennyworth in a way that I think will be one of the lasting legacies of this series of Gotham. To me, the scene where they are in the, proto Batcave, where Bruce has had his chat with Galavan about this exchange of a stake in Wayne Enterprises for information on his mum and dad's killer, and him battling and being torn apart by, he just wants to know, he wants this over and done with. Is it wrong for him to sell what he thinks is his mum and dad's legacy, which is Wayne Enterprises, to Theo Galavan? Is he battling with the idea that Theo's plan actually does seem, a fine line for bribery, and not just simply a business deal, as they say? But I love the embrace. I love the camaraderie that Alfred has here, where they just, they hug together. Alfred, lends his shoulder for support, says that it's Bruce, it's him that is the legacy of his mum and dad, not that the company, and that it is absolutely natural for him to want to kind of try and put this all behind him and move on. To me, this was really powerful and really great. And I have to say, standout moment of this episode. I loved the Crazy Babs bit and all of that as well. I really did like that. But this, to me, just like punches you with heart and soul as to how these two realize Alfred and Bruce and their relationship. And I just love it. It's so strong. It's so strong and so real. Brilliant.
Absolutely. Yeah. David Mazouz, again, just a heartbreaking performance. You totally understand. He's been given the opportunity to take away the responsibility of having to run $1 billion corporation. He finally will get to find out who it is that killed his parents, and can close off that chapter in his life. And you totally understand why that would be a great choice for him. He's 14 years old. It's the responsibility that's been placed on top of him is obviously weighing him down, and it's just so well played in this scene. Really, really enjoyed it, definitely. Which leads me on to my next point, which is Galavan and Bruce. It's kind of the other side of it. Galavan's playing a dangerous game with Bruce. He really is. It is so easy to see through that he is blackmailing Bruce. If Bruce just got a couple more lessons with his fighting stance, could he not just punch Galavan in the throat and take that file?
Absolutely.
There is just one moment of that scene that I absolutely adore and just couldn't stop laughing directly afterwards. It's effectively just as Bruce is about to sign the dotted line and refuses to do so. Then you have the exact right time moment when Jim and Harvey walk in and are about to arrest Galavan for the capture of the mayor. Galavan just does that great flip of the file into the fire as it burns away Bruce's future. But again, another great moment from David Mazouz as he sees the impact this is going to have and just, goes, is there any way of getting this back? He's almost about to jump into the fire after the file, But I loved this. I loved the interplay. Galavan totally revealed his plan. Now it's all out on the table, and now he's been arrested for what he's done to the mayor as well. So I don't know how he's going to get past the next episode, but I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with Galavan now that he's legitimately being charged with something by a witness that is left alive. That was quite an interesting one.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved the flip of the wrist that shoots that dossier into the flames. Really, really good. I loved the Machiavellianness of Galavan and his portrayal by James Frain. I really, really like it. Again, my only little quibble here, actually, is I would love to have seen some more time where Galavan is the mayor and he's being Machiavellian. I'd love to see that. I wonder how, it's like he was elected last episode and now he's been found out and it's all crumbled.
Right,
in one episode, immediately after, even just the fact that Mayor Aubrey is still alive, I'm just like going, Galavan has been so careful, and it's like, right, he's become mayor, now he's so careless that it all leads to him being arrested. I know you could have argued even in last week's episode, he revealed too much and it was found out too soon as well. But it felt right there. But it's this notion that, again, that Jim only has to think it almost, and all of a sudden all the pieces fall into place, and, hey presto, next episode, Galavan's caught. And it's like, okay, just allow that standoff between the two to like breathe and to really like develop into kind of hatred and just bitterness between the two. I would have loved that. It would have been so much better. And it's now, well, how is it going to play out with the brothers coming across the sea? Those are plans, and the plans for them to kill and knife the young Bruce Wayne is the brother who had obviously made it to Gotham. Is he going to take up the cause from Galavan now that he's been arrested? So there's some great questions that result from this. Like, what's Tabitha going to do? It would have been really good to see a bit more of Jim and Galavan in their places, one as mayor, one as, Barnes's right-hand man at the GCPD, facing off and playing that game of chess. And all of a sudden, it's all these dominoes just fall, and it's all falling into place for Jim Gordon. And part of me kind of goes, does he deserve it? But there you go.
It's interesting. Like, obviously, we'll see a lot more in the next episode because this is kind of how it closed out, really. So I'm intrigued, definitely, to see what happens.
He might escape.
You never know, and given how intelligently they've built up Galavan so far, you really have no idea whether this was part of his plan. At the end of the day, they got the piece of information from Barbara, who was sent to kill Jim. Did she give that information up freely, that the mayor was on the docks? Was that what she was told to give to Jim so that they found him at that particular time? There's lots of machinations going on within Gotham. And it's one thing I always want to caution myself when I'm watching the episodes, because we watch it episode by episode. We have no knowledge of what's coming up in the future episodes. And I always want to kind of go, okay, I didn't like that in this episode, but that could change in a week's time.
No, it could. And I mean, I fully realize that. Yeah. And it's not really saying that it's a bad episode because of it. It's just that I wish they had done that. And it might actually happen, because we won't know until the next episode. I mean, that's one of the great things about TV. But I'm wary of the fact that they have cut characters short before in Gotham. Yeah. And I hope they don't do it to... Yeah, and I hope they don't do it with Galavan. Look, Tabitha is still in the wind, absolutely. And I mean, as you say, Galavan has been absolutely calculating all the way through, and that this could just be part of his plan.
Yeah, absolutely. So my point was the Bruce versus Galavan piece in this episode. Bat versus Superman, Bruce versus Mayor. John, do you want to give us your next point?
No, well, I think certainly some of my points have been covered there in terms of, Galavan's knowledge of the information about Bruce Wayne's parents' killer. I love that, and I would love to know how he knows, or is it just a red herring? Like that, I'm really intrigued to find out. But certainly the fact that, again, it's just a nice little touch that he flicks it into the fire, as we've discussed, because, it is one of those untold, unknown mysteries of this whole universe, which is always just simmers away at the background. So I really, really like that. But I mean, you get the impression here that Galavan's plans are falling short all across the way. You have Mayor Aubrey being found and rescued down by the docks. You have Barbara not completing her mission to kill Jim Gordon. And you then have Bruce Wayne not signing on the dotted line. Galavan's plans seem to be unraveling. And I think really that's my sort of other big point here, is that his well-crafted plans, his well thought out and executed plans are all starting to fall a bit short. And that's why I think with the previous discussion, it's, well, have they now? is that the case? Because if, as you say, maybe this is part of his plan, well, then they haven't. Mm-hmm. But I do feel, and I got the impression that all his plans were coming to naught. And the one big thing that I really am looking forward to is how Silver St. Cloud and Tabitha respond, and how the brothers coming, the House of Dumas and the Hooded Order there, how they play out in Gotham. Absolutely. Because they are still coming, and maybe he gets rescued by them from incarceration. So this, I like just how it's all been mixed up like that. I mean, I really do. Despite it being a bit too quick for my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've got a final point. And it was more about the scene and how it was filmed. I really, really enjoyed the scene with Barbara, Harvey and Jim in the car as Jim's trying to get some information out of Barbara. Really well played, because Absolutely. It is shot out in the streets of New York, and you can really feel it like a 70s cop show. Exactly the kind of shows it was built on, like the streets of San Francisco. It was really like a cop show where you've got your crim in the back and you're trying to interrogate them as you're driving at high speed. But what I loved about it was the truck taking out the car as it gets to the crossroads. Good. It's fantastic, and was completely surprising to me. I was kind of worried for Harvey Bullock at that stage, as his head was hanging out of the car with blood coming down. I was kind of worried that they would take out that character in this kind of way in the show. They've done that kind of thing in the past, where they've taken out a character that people love very quickly. And I was kind of thinking, oh God, is this going to be, raising the stakes for Jim again, that his partner's been taken out, Luckily he's not. He's used to great effect later on in the episode. But there's also another great moment, and possibly our Batman 66 moment of the episode.
Possibly.
When the henchmen, who are all hooded, all come up, all hooded and dressed the same way, all come up and inject Jim and take him out of the car, knock him out and take him out of the car, It was one of those things where I was like, is this like the Joker's gang used to be in Batman 66?
It's exactly like that. Or, faceless goons. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the thing I liked about that scene as well, I loved, as you say, just the shot of Barbara's face in the rearview mirror as they're driving. Yeah. But then as Jim is coming around and he looks back and she's no longer on the back seat, she's escaped from the squad car, that, he looks around and there she is.
Yeah.
Looking at him, goading him. Like he's there immediately about to come out, and Tabitha's there as well. Mm-hmm. I liked Tabitha's role in that takedown of the police convoy. I thought it was really good. I loved the fact that they seem to be driving through an urban canyon, and I think that, as you say, that's what threw me when the truck came out of left field, really, because there were all these high lines and kind of, it seemed like cranes, dock cranes, and it was almost like sort of a western. There's the cavalry going down the ravine, the canyons, and the Indians are there, are waiting to pounce and to do their surprise attack, and you just don't know where they're going to come from. It was really, really good. I also like Tabitha's role in the church as well. Just how she said, enjoy this. Like, I mean, she's a psycho. She enjoys inflicting pain. So just giving, her and Barbara had that kind of seemingly relationship, whether it was lovers or whether it was like a tutor and a student relationship, where Tabitha was telling her and instructing her in the arts of torture and death and murder and killing, and using weapons and all that kind of stuff. And I love just how she says, take your time, enjoy it. That was dark, and I really liked that. Absolutely. I mean, the thing for me as well was, Bullock has concussion, but he puts one and one together and comes up, it's Gotham Cathedral. They do recover very easily from concussion, so actually Barbara falling out of the belfry is nothing.
That's true.
Stroll in the park.
This is Gotham. This is the kind of thing that happens. I like that there is a bit of investigation. Again, can't forget that Harvey is a detective. That is his job. He may not have been very good at it for many years because he was just taking backhanders from Fish Mooney, but he's been a detective in Gotham. But I think that brings us to a close on our points. I do have a note, which is connected to kind of the last point we were talking about, which is Harvey Bullock, because he does have another great Bullockism of the week.
Absolutely.
When speaking to Captain Barnes, Captain Barnes says to him, I need to know that one of you isn't going to get sucked into all the mind games that Miss Keane is going to be pulling out there. Harvey says, not to worry, no one's ever accused me of being sucked into mind games. Obviously a reference to people thinking he's not as fast a detective as some of the other members of the GCPD. But nice little moment from Harvey.
No, absolutely. I like that whole, the you're breaking up, Captain, classic moment. I thought that was just a nice little touch as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then the other quick line from Bullock was also anything that makes Barnes's tight ass nervous, I'm all for.
Yeah, so that was the line. Yeah. That was the classic line.
John, do you have any notes in this episode?
No, I don't. I think that brings us to the end of this discussion of Gotham. Derek, overall, what did you think?
Overall, I think I said at the beginning, overall, a bit of an inconsistent episode, but some good stuff in there. There's definitely Crazy Babs being in there, the nice little callback to Batman Returns. It felt like a little bit of a kind of a gap-filling episode. There's a lot of episodes in this season. Sometimes you do have to have some that just move the story along. But the standout moment in the episode, which you got to choose in your points, was definitely the meeting of Ed and Oswald, and just makes me go, I want the next episode. I can't wait for these two to be together. I'm really interested to see what Ed's version of taking care of Oswald will be. I'm really intrigued to see what happens when the two of them are in close proximity for a long time. Like last time they were together was effectively Ed stood too close to Oswald and was told to get away from him. So how are they going to stay in close proximity for a long time?
Well, absolutely. If him looking after the Penguin is anything like his looking after Christine Kringle, well, then Penguin better be wary and better watch out, because Ed Nigma is now a bad boy. And of course, Penguin doesn't fully know this. Mm-hmm. Maybe he does, but I don't think he does. So it'll be interesting to see. For me, I would definitely give this a good 3.5 flying batarangs out of 5. I really enjoyed an awful lot of points in this. And I really think it's teed up nicely for Penguin and Ed to really get a bromance going on in the next episode.
Nig Mobblepot is back.
Nig Mobblepot is most certainly back. And I thought the standouts for me, I loved Barbara in this episode, and I loved Bruce and Alfred.
That's true.
Absolutely fantastic. I also kind of did like that Galavan's plans came apart. Again, for me, there were a few inconsistencies, and again, it was down to timing. And I think that's why I just purred back on my rating. It was just the timing. Yeah. I actually liked how Galavan's plans fell apart, but again, it was just, well, he was only elected in the episode before. I think
we tend to want it to slow down at times when it speeds up, or the elements that it speeds up on, we tend to want them to focus on them a little bit more.
Yeah, I think so. And I think after that, I do feel that for me, I need to see Jim Gordon have some kind of payment for his sins, and maybe this will happen. But I'm not too sure. It's becoming a bit problematic for me having a righteous detective in there who at the same time is actually not righteous at all. And even in this heightened universe, I want to see him pay for that, and I want to see him get his comeuppance. And I'm hoping that, again, maybe for me, this is an element where the timing is working the other way, and they're taking their time on it, but I want to see it sooner. Look, it's minor niggles, really, because I love Ben McKenzie's portrayal of Jim Gordon. And I do like, how he's certainly his interaction with Barbara, I thought was excellent. It was really good to see those two team back up.
Yeah.
And again, how he plays that out with Leslie Tompkins will be really interesting. So as I said, I think 3.5 batarangs out of 5 for me in this episode.
So before we get into feedback, we do have a little bit of feedback to come, but the one big question from the episode is what's in that envelope from from Gallivan. Has he actually discovered the murder of the Waynes? It's quite telling that he wasn't opening up the envelope and showing Bruce even a little sample of some of the evidence that he pulled. Do we have any new theories on who the killer is, or are we still sticking with our original theory, John?
Well, I mean, our original theory was that it was Butch Gilzean on the basis of the size and kind of shape of the killer. And it could still well be that, but I do think it could equally be a self-portrait of Theo Gallivan, given the idea that he is trying to utterly destroy and crush the Wayne family and erase them as they did in the 18th century of the Dumas from Gotham.
Yeah.
He wants to wipe them out, like to the point where he wants to buy a controlling stake in Wayne Enterprises and presumably run it into the ground or replace it with a big Gallivan Enterprises after it. He wants to kill Bruce Wayne. He's given that plan over, and maybe it was Butch Gilzean still, but under the orders of the Dumas in exile to set this whole thing going. Maybe it was Court of Owls, and the other one is still, it could also be Penguin. Penguin knew that there was going to be blood and war coming to Gotham with the death of the Waynes. Yeah. Again, maybe it was Oswald Cobblepot, and maybe it was Oswald Cobblepot, again, hired to do it. Maybe it's not them for their own reasons, but being hired as contract killers. So there's a few nice little theories that you could sort of posit on this, definitely. What about you, Derek?
I do have a feeling we're going to find out soon, which is something that I really want to find out. I'm still convinced that either Butch or possibly Gabe, which is Oswald's other right-hand man, or was, at least. I'm kind of thinking it's one of those characters. I think we've definitely met the character. I think that's what will make the reveal special for Gotham, that we'll have met the character and we'll know them before the reveal of who the killer is. But I like that there's a possibility with Gallivan's kind of some of the things he teases a little bit. There's a possibility that it's a hired killer, and that the person who hired them is going to be the next layer of what Bruce has to investigate. Gives him more to do. He'll know who it was that killed his parents, but it gives him more to do to investigate the person behind those killings, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah. Or the organisation, the nefarious organisation, Court of Owls.
But there you go. That's one of the pieces of speculation that was definitely jumping out at me when I was looking at it, going, does he have anything in that envelope? Because he doesn't seem to want to give it over until Bruce has signed away the company. So maybe it was an envelope full of nothingness. You never can tell.
Absolutely. But I think with that, we move on to feedback. Our first bit of feedback comes from Paul Edwards through a direct message on Twitter. Question for the podcast. I doubt Theo will be in custody long. It is Gotham after all. I wonder what he's got up his sleeve. He must have had a plan if Barbara messed up. Also, because I study criminology, it's great to see how in the show they show how two different policing styles clash to get results, i.e. Gordon and Harvey versus Barnes, when Barnes told them to abandon and they continued. Well, thanks, Paul, for that. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if he goes to Arkham, there is the swinging doors of Arkham. I wonder if we'll see Blackgate maybe as because he's not necessarily criminally insane, although you could argue that he is. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see, as we kind of saying, Tabitha is still in the wind, and maybe Silver St. Cloud has got or has inherited or has been taught Tabitha's psychotic tendencies, and so equally the two of them could race to his aid along with the cohort of the Dumas Brotherhood.
Yeah, this could be battle in the streets with the Dumas versus the GCPD. Yeah,
so it could be battle royale, absolutely, and maybe he will accept the punishment and go to jail, knowing that his allies are still out there, definitely. Yeah. And absolutely, Barnes and Gordon and Harvey, the different styles is really, really important in this show. And it's really interesting to see. I'm still not entirely sure whether I fully I'm on board. I think there's still kind of extremes of those styles, possibly. And as I say,
Barnes does seem very military in his style, and despite Jim being, coming from a military background, he does seem to be still quite open to investigation. He doesn't. I'm not sure I agree with Barbara's assessment or with Leslie's assessment that he just runs at things. He does seem to want to investigate things that are going on around him.
I think Barnes is actually the more ethical of the two now. I think it was Jim who came in wanting to be what Barnes is. Barnes is the one that wants to do it by procedure. Mm-hmm. He sees black and white in his policing, which is you have broken the law or you haven't. And ultimately, I think that is what you do in a legal sense. Because otherwise, without enforcement of the law, there is no law.
That's true. So yeah, but really interesting to see these two go head to head. Thanks very much for that feedback, Paul.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul.
Our next bit of feedback comes in from Daniel Butcher of Welcome to Level 7. Just quickly, he says, I actually wondered who would be bold enough to eat the sandwich and walk away, leaving the bodies behind. Now that we know who, well, it's nice seeing these two get together in the end. So that's really interesting. Yeah, similar kind of thought, where the sandwich is stolen right beside two dead bodies. The bodies aren't touched at all. He just took a sandwich and walked off when there's clearly two people been murdered. You're kind of going, that's obviously Oswald, isn't it? It has to be Oswald because he's crazy.
Crazy, but clever.
Yes, very clever. Very clever. Thank you very much for that feedback, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel. We also got some more feedback from Natalie. Thank you so much, Natalie, for all the feedback you sent in here. It's great. And I just want to pick out one bit for me, which we didn't touch on. It's definitely this restocked and expanded strike force that has been done by Captain Barnes. This is a really important development. It's really him stamping his authority. But as you say, I think it's official now. The restocked and expanded strike force has become Gotham's red shirt army, anonymously taking one for the team so that the stars do not have to. At least the first four had names and a semblance of personality. But then again, she goes on to say, Gotham is already crowded enough as it is. Little room for character development for glorified extras. However, there might be room for one. Wasn't Rennie Montoya in Gotham Central a protege of sorts of Commissioner Gordon? I'd like to see them pull some future Strike Force member, preferably female, out as someone for Detective Gordon to mentor. She would then be reaching Detective about the time he makes Commissioner. Absolutely. And I do think that obviously we would love to see Rennie Montoya and Detective Crispus Allen back in this show.
Yeah.
I think they were two elements of Gotham that I think would have been excellent here. I mean, they could still be pulling out Jim Gordon. I mean, they pulled out his potential for being bad in the first season. And here we have him doing bad stuff. And I think they could really begin to question their original decision to sort of let him off and to fall in with him on the basis that actually he is a good guy after all. Because now they're starting to see this darker side. So I really like that take, Natalie.
Yeah, why would we create another Renee from the gang of the Strike Force? It would be kind of cool to bring in Renee again. Totally agree with you, John.
And I think I'm absolutely with you with regards to Alfred, recognising Theo's ploy at extortion, and just the whole aspect that Theo did have information on the Wayne murders, that it was, was it really legitimate information that Theo contained in that envelope, or was it just a simple way of getting Wayne Enterprises under his control? The whole Bundeswehr angle, as you say, really does kind of highlight the aspect that, Thomas and Martha Wayne really were killed over what they were discovering at Wayne Enterprises.
Oh, right. Interesting. Yeah, interesting. One other thing I wanted to pull out from Natalie's email is that she says, wait, we're only a third of the way through the season and Theo Galavan is arrested, his main plan thwarted. He's supposed to be the big bad all through the season. How much more twists and turns do we actually have? The former Dumas clan and its order will be looking for revenge now, certainly, probably with the Wayne knife. Penguin can still get his satisfaction against Theo. One good thing about Gotham is that they do not draw out many plots for an annoying length of time. They have packed a lot of what I'd been predicting about the end of the season into the first half of it. Totally true. I absolutely thought that Theo Galavan is going to be the central bad guy for the entire season of the show. 8 episodes in, he's now arrested. Like, you know,
yeah,
it's
big time.
They are cracking through the storyline, and partly to your point from earlier on, John.
Yeah.
You know, you wanted to see him as mayor, and you would expect him to see him as mayor, maybe blend into the background for a couple of weeks, and then come back as the bad guy. He was central to last week's episode. He had the closing scene, and then this week's episode really central, and now arrested. You know, it's kind of like, okay, well, that's it. We're almost done with this half of the season. We're going to shut down the Galavan arc and then move it to something else for the second half of the season. You know,
I mean, I definitely agree with Natalie. That she points out that Gotham, really does not draw out many plots for long or great or even annoying lengths of time. Absolutely, but I think it's annoying only if it's not good. In terms of if it's long, and it is interesting that we all kind of thought this was a full season character. And maybe he still is ultimately.
Yeah,
we really don't know. But as you point out, Gotham really is cramming this together. No matter how hard we try not to, we are obviously aware that Hugo Strange and Mr. Freeze are going to be in Gotham. So we know all this. So we do know that there's other characters coming. So it'll be interesting to see how they all fit together. Absolutely. Completely agree, Natalie. It's a fun ride as usual. Thank you so much for the feedback.
Yeah, definitely. And if you want to send us any emails or feedback, just send them to feedback@gothamtvpodcast.com. Come join the group over on Facebook. We're just building it up at the moment for season 2. Just search for Gotham TV Podcast. Join us in there and we'll be chatting about Gotham all day, all night as the UK episodes air.
And follow us on Twitter as well, at Gotham TV Podcast, where we live tweet the Gotham Season 2 that's aired in Ireland and the UK on Channel 5 at 10 p.m. every Monday night.
Absolutely. Next week's episode of Gotham, Rise of the Villains, Season 2, is called A Bitter Pill to Swallow. Hopefully it won't be a bitter pill. Hopefully it'll be a good one to watch. I'm looking forward to it, though, definitely.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much for listening. John, do you fancy a tea sandwich?
Maybe. There's just way too much foot traffic going through this podcast room. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.
Thanks for being a Butch supporter. Butch loves you, baby.
This has been a Flickering Myth Podcast Network production. For more information, head over to flickeringmyth.com for more shows like it. Find this show in iTunes by searching for the podcast name, and head over to youtube.com/Flickering Myth to subscribe to the Flickering Myth movie show. We'll see you on the next podcast. Take care. Bye-bye.